Hello, I'm Penelope Maver, and welcome to Earth Converse podcast, where we explore our relationship and conversations with the earth, all in the hope of inspiring a deeper connection with ourselves, each other, and the earth that is our home. And today I've got great pleasure to introduce Cori Wright Deily, who is, I last saw swinging her hips and stamping her foot in the New Mexico desert. She really had such a big impact on me, and I really wanted her to be here. She's got so much wisdom to share. But wait, there's more. She is the wife of Scott, who I interviewed on episode 17. And even their son, Coyote, has got a little bit of a mention because he was the child playing on Ray's tree that I interviewed Ray on episode 14, and he was talking about their friend's child playing on the tree. And wait, there's more. The four of them, so Cori, Scott, Ray, and Emerald, who I interviewed on episode 4. She was my first one. Together, they are the Southwest Passage team, and such wisdom around wilderness-based therapy, being guides, therapists. And so we're going to hear from Cori today, and she's tuning in from New Mexico. And I guess, Cori, I'm going to be linear and just sort of go, what you in terms of how has your relationship with Mother Earth and Mother Nature progressed over the years, and starting maybe with your earliest childhood memories. You go, you take it where you need to. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here with you. It feels like a really beautiful circle coming around from that circle that we sat in. Well, when I think about my relationship with the earth, I was thinking about childhood memories, and I definitely was raised in what many would consider a feral environment, I think. Where really my only memories inside were in deep winter. I was raised mostly in northern Utah. And I just remember the smell of grass and lots of bee stings and lots of tree climbing and beautiful fields of grass and the wind blowing. And I also have a lot of memories of the fierceness of the earth. So fires coming down. We had a fire that raged very close to our house.
Wow.
And walking to school and crazy blizzards and thinking as a child, like, have mercy, walking in these several feet drifts to school. And so I have really vivid memories, but I wasn't, raised in connection per se. It was just sort of the way that we lived. And I think that I was trying to think back of when it really began for me, when I started having conversations with the earth, and it became this reciprocal relationship. And it was actually Halloween, which we're very close to.
Yeah.
And I was
circling back.
Yeah. So much feels like it's circling back right now from sort of the beginning of having conversations with the earth. And I'm now kind of growing into my womanhood and adulthood, to where I'm able to really share this with other people, these conversations, and it took lots of time to get there. But it was around Halloween, and I was working in wilderness therapy, and it was a really cold night, and I wanted to make some tea out of a juniper berry and juniper foliage. And my co-guide said, well, are you going to ask before you take from the tree? And I was like, oh, that's something I should consider. And so I was like, okay. So I walked over to the tree, and, I said out loud, and it was very strange the first time I did it, but I said, may I have one of your berries and some of your tree? I'm really cold, and you're really high in vitamin C. And then all of a sudden, this huge gust of wind just went, and the whole tree just shook in front of me. And and so that was it for me. That was sort of the beginning where I was deeply humbled and
Wow.
really I think I actually dropped to my knees.
Wow. Yeah.
Felt like out of respect and almost fear, like, wow, I'm not as powerful as I thought I was as a human. You know?
Wow.
This
Yeah.
cold and wind and trees could take me at any moment. And
Yeah.
and so that was really the beginning of my deeper journey of conversations. And it took me, I think, several years of maturing and into my mid 30s now to really have the courage to, stand to have those conversations in deeper ways than just like, oh, let me tell you this story about Halloween. It was crazy,
Mm.
but a really deep, profound respect where it is so, and it is true, for me.
So that's interesting about, so you were a wilderness-based therapy guide before then, that experience. So was it in terms of going into wilderness guide, was it a more an outdoor intellectual experience until that moment or something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because you would think that a wilderness therapy guide would already have a deep and profound respect and relationship, considering that's what we're using as our medicine out there, pretty much. But it was just so happened that I was a whitewater rafting guide in Moab, Utah, and the water ran out early, and someone was like, I know a job you might like. And so I was like, wilderness therapy. And I did the interview. And I had a very short training about how to track people and animals,
Mm.
how to make fire with, a bow drill and hand drill. And then they put me in the field with 10 really unstable human beings. and and it was
Yeah.
a fast and furious learning curve. But it wasn't, it actually, that's where my relationship grew,
Yeah.
was seeing that the healing for the people out there was not coming,
Mm.
we were there to keep them safe,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But the work that was being done was much bigger than us.
Mm.
Our job was to really keep them alive, fed,
Mm.
sheltered,
Mm.
stable, mentally.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, and then that was sort of the beginning of my whole path into other wilderness therapy and psychotherapy and all the other things that
Mm.
I could say.
Yes, but and actually, because you did have done a lot of somatic work, and I actually just even your reflection on growing up in Utah, all those senses, uh,
Mhm.
yeah, a much must
Yeah.
be deep in your body, that and also that range. Alice, don't skip over that, because from the juniper tree shaking and probably giving you a lot of seeds in that wind, I guess. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but I will say, and I don't know if this might be a tangent and might not
Yeah,
be
great, go.
totally related, but I will say that from the beginning of my relationship with deeper conversations with the earth, it felt really overwhelming and exhausting, per se, to go from this schism in life where I was so disconnected and then so connected. I actually took a break from working with live people and like, I veered off to study biological and forensic anthropology because I wanted to work with bones, and essentially found a deep respect and curiosity for dead or non-living things, our perception of dead or non-living things, um, because it was so overwhelming to start this path as an adult person who had never been guided that way. um, that I think that it was almost too much for my psyche and I needed a break. And I was like, I need to hang out with some dead people who
Yeah.
don't talk and talk about, I need to not talk about diagnoses and, um,
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, just the bigness of the earth and the conversations and how heavy it can feel. So I don't know why it felt important to say that, or if it has anything to do with this conversation,
But
but
it does though, doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah, just I think how overwhelming it can feel. And I think especially today, in today's times, and the question of how do we have these conversations in modern day, and that question feels daunting and overwhelming, because it's, we're in this crucial time of needing to address our connection and disconnection with the earth, and how she sustains us and what's happening. And I think especially living in New Mexico around so much poverty, where there are mothers who just depend on the WIC program and what they can get from the grocery store, and food deserts and all of these things. It's like, how do we respectfully have these conversations while also respecting the state of so much of humanity? And that feels really daunting. How do I talk to my neighbors about this that have been growing alfalfa for 100 years in our valley, and that's just what they do, and that's their tradition, and that's their culture.
And being so much aware of that pain, and then we're constantly reminded of that pain through media, or if we just awake and look around us, and that responsibility of that. And I just love that you listen to yourself and just go, this is what I need in this moment. I need to hang out with dead people, and just know what we need, and respecting that bigness. Because I think that a lot of us won't sort of tune into, that's why how we feel. We disguise it in some way, or brush it aside or something. So how did it was it what you needed, exploring anthropology in that way? And
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that it gave me a much needed reprieve, and just break from the shock of coming to all my senses, and so many truths. And I needed to just, I spent, how I ended up in New Mexico was doing research at UNM and having access to the bones that were in their archaeology lab. And I spent, hundreds and hundreds of hours down in that old, it's like, a basement that's locked, and you have to have a code, and they're very old, protected archaeological things. And I just spent hours alone down there measuring bones and teeth. And I suppose it was, a form of me maybe checking out from the heaviness that it felt to be in the world. And it was also a really important thing for me to connect with the part of me that wasn't raised to believe that we could speak to dead people or spirits or the spirit of the earth. And so for me, it was also this other aspect of learning how to find respect in conversation with those things that we have been told aren't alive, like the trees, or my grandmother, who I deeply wanted to speak to and couldn't until I did a fast and a ceremony. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can speak to my grandmother and call her in, and she is the flowers and the grass, and so I needed to also rekindle my relationship that had been broken by our modern idea that we can't speak to dead things, or that there is this other schism, that there is the dead and there is the alive. And that's created in the bifurcation of separation of us and the earth too. I think, thinking that, like, what's cutting the tree down gonna do? What, it doesn't matter. It's just a tree. And so I think it was a break, and it was also addressing this other aspect of me that was deeply wounded, of growing up as a child, thinking that we were separate and that we couldn't have connection to all things seemingly dead or alive, whether that be human or plant or animals or all the things.
Do you remember the sort of the sense of disconnection, or is it sort of a gradual thing from your childhood? Is there any, well, or even adultness when we sort of feel disconnected from the...
Mm. You know, I don't remember any sense of disconnection per se. I only remember the majority of my memories are when I'm connected. You know, when I think for some reason bee stings when I was a kid is like, it's this really big memory. And I think it's because we're just so brought into our body as a child with a bee sting. It's like, oh, wow, my foot is swelling. I would always get them from stepping on the dandelions in the parks or my front yard. And, you know, it brings us into our body and it really, it's that very humbling, like, oh, wow, that little tiny thing can really hurt me, you know, or it hurts. It's not that they want to hurt us. They're scared, but yeah. And so I remember moments of like, very few moments of connection where I was brought into my body senses immediately. But I think it's more of just feeling the pain now as an adult of how much I missed. And, you know, when I think about raising our son, Coyote, and I don't know if you heard recently in New Mexico, thousands and thousands of birds were dropping from the sky, dying.
No.
Yeah. And so we had several birds on the land dropping down. And so Coyote got to bury a lot of birds, and we got to do a lot of little ceremonies and just, you know, talking to the birds. And I was just like, wow, if I had that when I was a kid, death would be so much less scary. And my whole worldview would be different.
Absolutely. That is such a gift to, you know, to help him really be there with it. And yeah.
And the you know, it taps into that, the death and the grief and these things that we're needing to talk about with the earth and can't. And if I had been shown and taught that it's okay to talk about death and like, oh, let's not just move past that dead bird really quickly, it's gross, let's stop and give like real respect to the fact that might be a mother bird who has little babies in a nest that are now without food. And so yeah, I think it taps into this bigger, how are we raising our children, you know, to be able to have these conversations in the future about grief and death and earth and the cycle that we're all in.
The lovely Living and Dying Meredith Little's program. I did it last year, and it was really beautiful here in Spain. Yeah, it was so beautiful. And yeah, one of the question is, what is your first memory of death? And it was interesting, you know, how adults either didn't talk about it, but we knew that something went on, or that it was just sort of in hindsight really clumsily done. You know, and not honoring that, and how that really does can often, you know, form us, you know, that first experience. But if we can engage in it and show ceremonial way, age appropriate and all that, how beautiful that is for the next generation.
Yeah, if there's one, but I'm not going to say if there's one thing, I always say that, but there's several things that, that feel really important, you know, to pass on to my son. It's that ability to have the conversations about death and grief and the cycle of life, and why do bad things happen, and why are humans doing this to the earth, and why, you know. And he's also in this phase, you know, 3-year-old is like, everything is why. And so we're doing a lot of explaining, and death is very much up for him right now. And so we're having lots of conversations about death, but it's so true. It's kind of like adolescence and puberty, and what would it be like if our first conversation about coming into adulthood was different? Oh my gosh, what if it wasn't terrifying to get my menstrual cycle?
Yeah.
That would have been lovely,
Yeah. And not only terrifying, how beautiful that it was a celebration,
Yeah.
and really embracing of that, not even a hiding of that. What Charles Eisenstein did a lovely article on the coronation. He just said, like COVID has brought death to the front. Let us seep in it. So, yeah, where you got to with COVID this time, and this unique time in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been an interesting ride, because I think that it's brought up for me. I just read this amazing book. It's now what I consider sort of my Bible in life, and it's Sowing Seeds in the Desert, and it's written by a Japanese farmer, kind of the father of permaculture. And he really addresses this idea of separateness, and I think taps into the idea of human supremacy in general, thinking that we are above the power of the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really rooting from this separateness. And I think what has become very apparent for me, and been very hard to have conversations about with people, is how much of that is being brought to light with COVID. This idea that we think we can control this thing, a virus that's extremely intelligent and will adapt, and is really likely equalizing from deep wounding of the earth, of potentially overpopulation, of too many people in small spaces inside. That's really where we're seeing that it's being spread, is inside. I think it's beautiful that the sanctuary from COVID is being outside with people. So for me, unfortunately, I haven't been able to talk to many people about it, because there's this idea that if I bring up the idea of human supremacy, or that we think we can, beat it per se, and instead of like really tapping into this death and dying thing is so a part of life, then people take it as like, I'm just wishing death upon people, or like irresponsibly acting out. But I think it's really has the potential to bring great humility to humanity, and conversations about the reality that we're in, that death is very much a part of life, and we are not more intelligent than viruses. I don't believe so. I don't think we are. I think that's, especially one like this, there are diseases and illnesses that we've been able to beat because they kill their host faster. But the truth of the matter is that this doesn't kill the host as often as it needs to not live on. So it's actually very intelligent in that way. So that's definitely been up for me, and I've had a lot of grief about how difficult it's been to have that conversation with people.
And would that surprise, but is that in terms of amongst your community? And you've got a lot, you've got a lovely community of people that are very, I would say like-minded. That sounds like I mean that in a complimentary way, like in terms of if we stick with like-minded people, we don't get challenged. If we,
Mm-hmm.
but that, I don't know, I'm just surprised that you feel that way, that you haven't been able to talk about it. Does it?
Yeah, there's only been, I think, actually like 2 people in my close circle of friends who I've been able to have a conversation about it where somebody didn't get angry and start
Yeah.
like name calling, that, or go on a tangent
Yeah.
or a rant about being irresponsible. Because I think it is possible to like do respectful things and wear a mask around vulnerable people, or wear a mask, and also like we need to be having these conversations.
Yeah.
It needs
Yeah, I
to be
agree.
both.
Yeah, it's the
And
end, isn't it? The end.
yeah,
Not be.
yeah, yeah. And people feel very threatened when they hear my any idea of human supremacy. It's like, which really is what climate change is about,
Yeah.
this idea that we reign supreme and we don't have to bow down on our knees to what feeds us, the water and the
Mm.
soil and such. And I have one friend I was having this conversation with, and it was really beautiful. And he was like, maybe I think sometimes this is a time where we need to be holding each other closer rather than farther apart. And I think that could be taken in many different ways, but that really hit my heart in a big way. That was like, there's so many elderly people dying alone and women birthing alone. And
People.
I can't
Yeah.
accept that is a way that humanity is meant to be. I just can't.
No. No.
And I think it's, I feel like a broken record. I'm sorry. I just keep talking about this, weaving into the separateness and that we are separate, but we're literally separating people to die
Mm.
alone
Mm.
because of this. And I think that is really a wake-up call about where we're at,
Mm.
and our
Absolutely.
inability to have these really hard conversations.
Yeah.
Because as a healthy 34-year-old woman, I would so happily go be next to my grandmother and risk myself like getting COVID,
Mm.
so that she didn't have to die alone.
Absolutely. Like in
Yeah.
terms of that individual choice, it's the individual and the collective responsibility. And, but we get trapped in this sort of, we have to do everything collective, or, we have to be separate. And actually there is between that, there's a real spectrum of people choosing, in a really compassionate way. And yeah, mm,
Yeah. Well, that philosopher, I don't want to say his name wrong. It's a
yeah,
Japanese
yeah,
name. And I think I'm going to try to just look it up real quick.
yeah.
Sowing Seeds in the Desert. That's the name of the book. But he really talks to, I love the book because he was a biologist and came from a very scientific background.
Mm.
My father is a PhD organic chemist. And so I was raised with the idea that science is the end all be all, the only truth and the light. And wow, that's another thing that really blew my mind. But this writer, he talks about how there is a place for human intervention, and there is also a place of profound respect of just being in true nature and being true nature and respecting the cycle that it is. And he talks about this beautiful story, the pine tree beetles. But basically it was that this human intervention has been much more detrimental to the trees. So they were actually they were growing this fungus that was saving themselves. And then we intervened and did the beetles, and we have killed off millions of trees because of our need to intervene and think that we have the answer. And so he does a really beautiful job talking about modern science and how there is a place for Western medicine. And also there's a place for these conversations with nature and the earth. And, having to come to a place of acceptance.
Yeah,
Through the
surrendering
lack
to
of,
that, observe it, observing with great attention and care, and holding, suspending belief, and not imposing our view, our way of thinking, but just surrendering to that. And yeah,
yeah, yeah. And so it's sowing seeds in the desert, and
sowing seeds into
Masanobu Fukuoka.
that's lovely.
He's all about, the idea of permaculture is that you live someplace for at least a year and you don't do anything but listen, and watch. And you watch, what is the pattern of the runoff? Where do the birds live? Where is the soil growing well? What wild plants are there? And it isn't until we really sit and watch that we know what then to do with the land in best practices for growing food and where to build. And it doesn't necessarily work if you think about our old nomadic cultures where you're like, we just need shelter and food right now because a snowstorm's coming. So, we have to take it with that grain of salt that it's sort of a modern adaptation to where humans are, but it's the best one that I've found so far.
And I love that. I was thinking about it like in a company, like a new chief executive comes in. Imagine them taking that approach, and for a year just listening, as opposed to, it's always like 90 days, 90 days as a new chief executive. What am I going to change? Going, I need to be different from my predecessor, but imagine that if we took that approach, and if that was allowed in terms of the shareholders and the stakeholders, and just a beautiful process of observing, listening, seeing seeing the potential in people, and seeing their own patterns and how they problem solve and take responsibility.
Yeah.
That'd be something.
It would be really amazing. And I think mind blowing. Yeah. I mean, one of my supervisors, I think one of the best things I've ever been told, one of the most simple pieces of advice in therapeutic work, is this idea to always ask one more question. So always just come with this deep curiosity. So never assuming anything, but ask one more question. And when I can actually keep myself calm enough to do that, I usually discover something so raw and beautiful that lies under the anger or the resentment or whatever there is. And I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of wisdom I've ever been given, is to ask one more question. And I think it's works on all spectrums of life, to ask. There's always a place for, sticking your stake in the ground and making your place known. But, I think it's also, there's always the and asking one more question of the land and of other people.
And going back to your COVID conversation, imagine if for us to do that rather than go in with the opinion. We can have a stake, but what is the question, and opening up and dropping down beyond that anxiety, because humans have run around with our tense muscles anyway, and this is just supersized COVID, isn't it? Because that death has come closer, and we've got financial pressures and societal pressures. But to go beyond that, what would the question be? Yeah. Wow. Do you feel hopeful about the collective? You've got elections coming up and all that.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't, per se. And I have a tattoo on my back in Spanish that says hope, faith, and courage from when I was 18, and I was a traveling missionary, actually, to Mexico. And I think about that story. Sometimes Coyote always rubs that tattoo, and there's a
Really?
mole there, and he's obsessed with, it's a comforting thing to him.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. He's constantly rubbing that tattoo that says hope. And I've often prescribed to the idea that, like, what is life without some sense of hope or faith? And I think it's, for me, the election is going to be really big. I think it's going to be, because I do think that people are making a choice to either deeply care about the earth or not.
Mm.
To me, it's very simple. And beyond that, all the humanitarian things don't matter if we don't have clean water and our children don't have beautiful places to see flowers and trees, and they're dependent on the government for eating their food. But I think I'm going to have to really decide on how I am in the world after that, after the election, and where to go from there, and how to be active in the community and in my beliefs. And we'll see. Do you feel hopeful? I'm curious.
Yeah, I do. I think in terms of, I don't know about, I think that I love Ray's paper about annihilation. I think, ultimately we're going to, the human race won't be here. I think nature will be fine in some way. Sort of, or more immediate, I think we get, this dancing with the dark and the light, and I think, but I do see a rise in consciousness. I do feel, do I choose to see it and feel it? Consciousness doesn't always make us happy, but so there's more, probably darkness or depth or the conversations we need to have. But I think I do. And it's sort of like a little bit of Winston Churchill. I'm an optimist. What other choice have we got? And it's not Pollyanna hope. I think it's sort of hope that, like, well, action, like just what even you said, how am I going to be in the world? What is my role in community? What does my activism look like? It's the old Zen thing, isn't it? Given this, now what? At any moment, what do we do? I mean, but you've got a child. I mean, like, it's the greatest act of hope there is, isn't there? To bring a child in the world. Fundamentally, you do. You are hopeful.
Yeah. Well, you raise a couple of really good points, and it really, for me, hit home when you said that nature will go on and the earth will go on, and that's actually what I feel the greatest amount of comfort in. Is that no matter what us humans do, like, the earth is gonna go on, and that's what I hold, I think, some of the deepest grief about, is just the state of the planet. But also, I do feel like if I didn't have any children, it would potentially be different for me, because I so deeply want him to see the beauty that I was able to see. And I already see that changing, but it's also my responsibility as a mother to show him the beauty where it is, right? Like, it's not, they already come with these curious eyes and hearts, and that will dwindle away as they grow up and responsibilities come in. But it's the fact that we have another one on the way is like,
do you? I didn't know that.
Oh, God.
Yes, you are hopeful. Oh, congratulations. Oh, that's beautiful.
I was trying to remember if we had told you, because I haven't actually told anybody except close friends. I was like, should I say this? The podcast is going to be very public, but whatever.
Well, we can time the podcast to when you want to do that. Oh, lovely.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. So we have another one. We're expecting Coyote to hopefully be a sibling on around May 2nd. And Scott and I think we both really struggle with the grief in the state of the world. It manifests in totally different ways. It's very interesting being in a relationship with someone who grieves so differently. But with that said, I was very surprised when he sort of made the conscious decision to say, okay, well, let's have another kid. And I was like, but you're in such deep grief. And one of my first thoughts was, he does have hope. He does. So you're really tuned in, Penelope. You really, you nailed it in terms of children sort of being like the ultimate act of hope. And what they bring to the world is just, the profanity that they bring is so refreshing. It's, when we get so steeped in our adult minds of thinking and intellectualizing and all these things, they just, they're like, accidentally
want to talk about poo
their pants and
poo and fart.
And you're like, and you go from being in grief to like, well, I'm going to wipe your butt now. Okay. This is life. And, they're the little, people running around ceremonies. I just had a couple of women, dear sister friends, come down and try to do a land blessing for the land that we're now officially stewards of. And they, trying to do ceremony. My friend has I think she's 16 months and then Coyote, and Scott was actually out on the land fasting. And it was quite hilarious to try to do ceremony with children running around, and just the reminder of what the importance of their place in this world, that what would we all do if we were just adults talking about stuff, it would be terrible.
But they are the ceremony, isn't it? Sort of everything happens, isn't it? Everything that's happening is the ceremony. And didn't Meredith and Steve talk about the profanity, the sacred and the profane? I love that, just embracing it all.
Yeah, it's one of the most important things for me in life. I think it's one of the best things that Emerald ever brought into my life as an example of a woman who, like, I had been in years steeped in these traditions of yoga and Zen meditation, where it was like, you be quiet and you sit and you do these things. And Emerald was the first woman that gave me full permission. You were there. She was like, you can rage. Yeah, you can scream and you can yell.
Yeah.
And, you can, and all these things. And was the first time anyone ever told me I could pull a rapist out of my body by myself, by the power of the great mother that I'm a part of. And I did it, it was like, and it was the profanity that brought me back to life that just, I was like, and gave me such a better balance, an idea of what the world like really is. So I'm a big fan of the sacred and profane, and especially the profane lately. Anyone who knows me knows that I have a lot of profanity in my life. The filter is dwindling down very quickly.
Good.
Yeah, but it's important. Wow. I really enjoy having conversations with people where everything is sacred. I'm like, you obviously haven't worked in a refugee camp, or in a jail or somewhere where they're like, the profanity runs deeper than just the jokes that we talk about, it's very much a part of life that we need to. Yeah.
I do, get the real impression, your integrated self. I know you in terms of that, it's that ongoing journey, but a real conscious effort to bring all your potentials, and really, even, motherhood, when I knew you, were you even think about it because of health reasons, what, wasn't going to be an option. It's just sort of like, no, I'm going to that and love, like it just embracing it all, and your incredible curiosity, and your studying, and your Yeah, and trying different things, and yeah, don't know. I don't know. It's not. Is there a question in that? I'm not too sure, but just your integrated, your journey of towards wholeness or your full potential.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if there's a question per se, but I will put out there that I feel like I'm just starting to tap into like a real mature ability to be in the world and give any gift of my experience. Like I know that I did before, just being able to like sit with people and be present and do the things I've been very blessed to do. But I think there's something really powerful in womanhood with the, maybe starting in the mid 30s. I don't know yet because I'm not past there, but something that happens midlife that's really powerful and really deep. And I always tell my friends, I can't wait to be 40. I feel like that's when life is really gonna start, beginning for me in terms of being able to offer the wholeness of the experience that I've been through. Because I don't know, for some reason in my mind, I feel like that's sort of a magic age right now. And so I think you're just seeing and witnessing the beginning of me coming into a better ability to have perspective on my life as a whole. It just comes with time.
And consciousness, I think. So where are you at with your wilderness-based work, or working with people and using nature as both the source and the healer and the stakeholder and all her wisdom?
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. So I had my own huge healing experience that Kate, I was a wilderness therapy guide, and that was sort of my main lens that I drew from, that was sort of it. And then I had my experience out on the land of healing from, one big sexual assault, and really other ones too that commonly occur in women's lives. And at the same time, I was also introduced to somatic experiencing. And the whole premise of somatic experiencing, it's a trauma training institute. And kind of the idea is that we work with our nervous system in treating us like we are mammals. We're mammals. And so the natural processes that happen with animals out in the wild, in the fight, flight, and freeze, are very much what we go through as humans in healing from trauma. And so of course I was very drawn to it because it helped me tremendously in my own healing. Again, it was having permission to shake and to rage and to feel these things that other therapists were like, oh, that's not safe, don't do that, and so it was this beautiful combination of going out on the land and healing through the mother and empowerment of another woman and somatic experiencing, and that launched it. I got real clarity that I wanted to go to graduate school to get my master's in somatic psychotherapy and do the SE training, which Scott and I did together over a few years. And so then in that process, I realized, wow, it's a very white Western lens that I'm working through. Yeah. And I, after working so many years in wilderness therapy and working with very wealthy white people, mostly, I wanted to do something very different, because I'd actually grown up doing a lot of work in Mexico and traveling to other places, and knew that there was so much more to life, but hadn't really pursued it outside of my white lens. I lived in India and studied yoga and all that, but it was like very much the young white girl that just went and did that. And so then I was launched after graduate school into really working with parts of the population in New Mexico. I have made up my own language, and I call them the invisible people. Because everyone has this really romantic idea of New Mexico, that it's like, it's just romantic. It's Georgia O'Keeffe. It's First Nations people. It's Native American. It's, and what people don't realize is that we are in the deepest poverty. We're either number 1 or number 50 in everything. Is kind of our joke here. I think we might be last in education. So I started to work at the Santa Fe Mountain Center with these populations that, I just didn't get to come in contact with. And it's been a eye-opening journey. So I did that and worked a lot with Native peoples and inpatient addiction facilities. And we did adventure therapy, so ropes courses and things like that. And then I was like, I want to go deeper than this, because it's still adventure therapy. And so I started working at women's shelters and a sexual assault survivor crisis center, and also in jails. And I began to really see that, wow, like, how do I can't use the same language here. In these places, because these people are in the ultimate place of survival all the time, that the other populations, mostly white people, are not. So I couldn't just go into a jail and do work with people and then, put them back in to their cell where they are in a place of deep survival. Or women coming through shelters who have no idea where their next meal is going to come from, who are sitting across from you as black guys. It's like two completely different worlds. And so I've really been asking myself the question, how to bring nature into this work and social justice in respecting all walks of life and where they come from. And it's been a really hard one. I lost my job due to COVID at the rape crisis center that I was working at, where I worked with survivors of violent crime and domestic violence and sexual assault. And it's been a good break for me, I would say, to really reevaluate, because there's a part of me that believes in social justice and giving services to those people. And there's also another part of me that just really deeply believes that nature is the best salve and the best medicine. So I've found little ways to weave in an agency work, in the jail. When we would do orienting, I would find the one tiny window at the top of the jail, and they would just look at the sunlight coming through for 5 minutes. And they would just be like, wow, I haven't seen sunlight in days. Or I would make a request to go out into the recreation area, where sometimes you could see some of the sky through the gate, and we would just look at the clouds, and we wouldn't do much talking. We would just, sit together and see what came up. And so I've had to really shift what my idea of that work is. And I think more recently, I have come to the realization that the most honest way for me to do this work is through the land. And so I'm in that question right now. And I think it's very appropriate for my age, kind of like I was speaking about, coming into these years where I'm closing the gap into 40 and will really come into the place of knowing my place with this work. All I really know, I have a small private practice that I'm going to be starting. And I'll do everything I can to incorporate nature in the most respectful way possible. And we'll be sort of dreaming and thinking and envisioning about how to bring women on the land that we have to come together, specifically sexual assault survivors
Yeah.
and domestic violence, to heal in a group through the land and through ceremony. And that feels most authentic to what I believe in and who I am.
And what you've
And
experienced. Mm.
yeah. Because I also don't want to be the white savior that feels like the need, like,
Yeah.
like I have to go work in the jails in these
Yeah.
places because they need my help.
Yeah.
And yes, the services are needed, but if I'm sitting and thinking about how the land needs to help this person, there's a disconnect there that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
So I'm teaching a couple of courses in a social work
Oh,
graduate.
great.
Yeah. And that's been great because I feel like I can really offer my experience in all of these realms to students who are going into the world. And I almost feel like that's one of the most appropriate ways that I can really like be in the world in a way is I can just offer, well, this is what I did, or this is what this might look like. And this is how you could, and we just sort of like talk about ideas about how to bring nature and the outdoors into these people's lives. And that feels really good.
Lovely. That's a lovely contribution because you are inspiring in that and how you articulate in concepts and ideas. And I can imagine the real, a lovely role in that. And I also in terms of with introducing people to nature, you sort of getting out of the way. It's sort of like helping them to see the sun or the clouds or come into the land, and stepping away. But it's sort of the gentle, like, this may help you heal, or this may,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just had a conversation with a student about this the other day about how important it is for us as therapists not to actually introduce the nature per se, but for us to maybe, so there's two ways of that I tend to do it. And there's one, and that's when I ask anyone to orient to something that they see in the room that brings them peace. It is almost always a bird, a tree, the sunlight. I mean, I want to say like 90% of the time.
Beautiful.
It's a very
question.
naturally occurring process. And so I just simply ask people, find something that's beautiful or comforting. And then the other way is to, be really respectful and say, do you have a relationship with the earth? Do you go outside much? Do you, and sort of like ask those questions. And I take the lead of the person, because some people are, I've worked with people who did cross the desert and walk miles and miles, and the wilderness is threatening. They had to actually survive it in a different way that we did. So it's really important to ask one more question and be curious and find people's relationship with the earth. It's our ethical responsibility to not introduce it as something instantly beautiful, although that's my perception. So there's a couple of different ways that it can be brought in, either naturally by asking a question, or respectfully asking what their relationship is. And then I've noticed that people who have a relationship with the earth, we drop in deeper and quicker than other people, because then the pressure is put off of us as this dynamic of two people healing. It then becomes something much bigger than us, and the responsibility is not ours. And so that's really beautiful and nice.
That's lovely. Have you come with people that say they don't feel like they've got a relationship? Do they, upon the next question, they discover they do, or remember it, or see it in a different way?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have had people who are like, I hate camping. I hate being outside. I hate, and, I might just gently bring in like, well, there's been a lot of really great research recently about PTSD and putting our hands in the soil and the chemical reactions that happen. So I tend to tap into science, because otherwise I'll probably be seen as some crazy hippie, that's like, doesn't have any grounding on what she's saying. And so I might do that, or I might just let it go, and I don't push it, because one day it will naturally happen. It will. Yeah.
It's true.
I'm just going to keep asking them to orient, or I'll say, let's do a session outside, or let's go on a walk, or let's, we'll just be outside when it's very comfortable and a good temperature. And so it requires not having an agenda, for sure. But I've gotten those people. It's rare, but I get them.
Yeah. And then going, I suppose the somatic thing is, or the sensations more so than in terms of feeling the sun on your skin, or the breeze, or And so, in terms of what would be another question that you would like to be asked, not necessarily answered? What would you like me to ask you?
That's a good question. What would be a question that I would like to be asked? So like, I think another way of saying that is like, what feels most important to me?
Yeah, like, great.
Yeah, I think it's not so much a question, but just like a plea for people to hear that there are ways to have these conversations that aren't pulling people apart. It must be, coming from a place of being grounded. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's also that. And then there's this other part of me that's chiming in and saying, and there's a place to also really fiercely take a stand right now for the earth and the planet, and women, I think, especially. And to not be scared to take that stand, to have conversations and take that stand. So I think I just said two kind of different things, but I think both are possible. I think
yes.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, I think they're both the and. You take the stand and know there's opening up. There's an opening up of that conversation, isn't it? It's the listening, it's the questioning, it's that dance of like, and stepping into the power, stepping into the conversation.
Yeah, I think that now is the time before it's too late for the next several generations to really take a stand and have these conversations. And I'm working on that myself, with my own parents. How do I have these conversations about my deep love for the earth and how voting does make a difference? So.
And that's where it starts, isn't it? The family. That's
where
the conversations will start.
Yeah, and I think if I were to end with one thing, it would be to tell people that you're not alone. That we all feel so isolated right now. And I think are dealing with some form of grief or underlying depression or deep questions about our life and the way that we're living. Whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, there people are freaking out right now. But I would just, let everyone know that you're not alone. And I'm happy to have these conversations with anyone at any time if you would like.
Right. And I'm going to put a link in. I'm going to put a link into your details, and that's an invitation to that. Yeah, the world needs to hear more from you.
And you too. Thank you for doing this and having the courage to have a podcast where it's like, we're conversing with the earth. that's, about and to and with and
Yeah,
each other. And I so deeply appreciate what you're doing with this.
yeah.
And I thank you so much
Oh,
for the
you're
courage
part
it
of
takes.
it. Thank you. And go and drink from the fountain, literally and and figuratively. And take care. Lovely to see you. So we'll put a pause there and see you back for the next Earth Converse podcast. In the meantime, go out and enjoy Earth one conversation at a time.